This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. All around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me.
When asked where their food comes from, adults will often answer with the name of any number of supermarkets at their most convenient availability. They may not pause to consider the true origin of their produce, say the farmer and the earth who both toiled to grow beautiful deep purple eggplant, or the cow that grazed in a feedlot before it ended up in a styrofoam package in the meat aisle. Upon asking children where their food originates, many kids believe it's from the produce section at the grocery store, rather than from the soil on a farm. The truth is, we don't know where our food comes from, or perhaps we don't want to acknowledge it. Admittedly, the food system in the US is alarming. Whatever the reason, we are markedly disconnected from our food. This disconnect can explain the very reason we see health problems proliferate and the environment suffering injury. Most of us are far too aware that obesity has hit epidemic proportions in this country. We are addicted to processed foods and convenience. What people may not realize is that human behavior is not the only root of this complex epidemic. Even though we'd like to vilify McDonald's every chance we get, they're not the only ones to blame. Big agribusiness, industrial farming, or factory farming is the other big bad wolf. In the 1950s, a movement began called the Green Revolution that, ironically, introduced biotechnology into our food. With scientists and biotechnicians hard at work, headed by Norman Borlaug, the entire farming industry, and therefore food industry, was transformed into a major large-scale production. Funded largely by the Rockefeller Foundation, the revolution's main goal was to aid global starvation and to put U.S. agriculture on the global market. Technologies included chemical pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. One major crop was targeted as the panacea for world hunger: corn. Today, the U.S. produces an incredible surplus of corn. Farmers are chiefly motivated by subsidies they receive from the government so they can continue to produce crops on a factory-sized scale, also known as commodity crops. Because the U.S. manufactures so much corn, we see it creep into our foods in its other known form, high fructose corn syrup. Corn is ever present in so many of the processed foods that appeal to many palates. Who doesn't like sugar? What we don't think about, however, is that when we buy convenience, like the quick and easy applesauce pack or the tangy healthy start to our day called OJ, we're loading our bodies with corn syrup. And it tastes good, and it keeps us coming back for more. It's truly remarkable the number of places where corn syrup, that ever-present commodity crop, rears its head. It's no surprise that we've become overweight. Somehow, what began as an effort to answer the hunger crisis turned on us in the other direction. What's equally alarming is the ways that factory farming is affecting the sustainability of our environment. Such massive enterprise leads to overfarming of the land and a hindrance of biodiversity. Every summer, we yearn to taste the fruits of a sun-filled season of cookouts, brimming with grilled hamburgers, corn on the cob, and fresh red tomatoes. We hit the grocery store ready to pile our baskets with the fruits of the season. But what we may not know is what all of those precious foods had to endure just to make it to the backyard barbecue. Consider the conditions that the pig that becomes your hot dog and the cow that becomes your hamburger might have tolerated before it landed on your bun. Vegetarians alone should not be incensed at what occurs at many factory farms. In CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, conditions are often so crowded that animals cannot seek open space to defecate in a place where they are not feeding on corn. To offset the potential for disease, farmers pump massive quantities of antibiotics into these animals. In fact, 3/4 of all antibiotics in the US are used in CAFOs. What we might also consider is what happens to those bright red tomatoes of summer. To get that perfect tomato shape and that perfect tomato red hue and that perfectly tolerant fruit which stands impervious to weather conditions, pests, and long truck rides across country, farmers utilize genetically modified organisms. Genes are manipulated to ensure growers their foods will be of utmost appeal. However, such modification hinders biodiversity and the authenticity of our tomatoes. While Europe has implemented a labeling system for their genetically modified foods, the US has yet to catch up to its progressives. Biotechnology continues to threaten our health and our ecosystem by chemical farming practices. With pests and weeds always threatening a farmer's intention to generate handsome, bountiful crops, pesticides and herbicides have been the holy grail to industrial agriculture. Farmers use almost 1 billion pounds in pesticides each year. These powerful chemicals are a detriment to the environment's sustainability and to our health. In the same way that the human body can build up a tolerance to bacteria, or conversely to antibiotics, weeds and bugs have been able to repel the very chemicals that are supposed to repel them. More than 500 insect species have become impervious to chemical control. Once tolerance on this level occurs, evolution and a biologically diverse environment are altered. What we tend to fear even more is what threatens our personal health. Many researchers have linked pesticide residue on foods to diabetes, metabolic syndrome, seizures, Parkinson's disease, birth defects, brain damage, and even cancer. Our precious environment and our precious lives are the victims in this failing food system. So, how are we to respond?
This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. All around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling. The voice was chanting as the fog was lifting, this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, and this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, the dust clouds rolling. The voice coming chanting, and the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me.